They mocked her for missing every shot, until the instructor hissed, "Check behind." Sarah Martinez had never held a gun before walking into the Metro City shooting range on that humid Tuesday morning in July. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as she approached the front desk, her palms already sweating despite the air conditioning. At 24, she worked as a librarian at the downtown branch, spending her days surrounded by books and whispered conversations. The shooting range felt like stepping into an entirely different world. "First time?" asked the burly man behind the counter, his arms covered in military tattoos. His name tag read, "Rick, Range Safety Officer." Sarah nodded, tucking a strand of her brown hair behind her ear. "I signed up for the beginner's course. Sarah Martinez." Rick checked his computer and handed her a clipboard thick with waivers and safety forms. "Fill these out. Class starts in 10 minutes. You'll be with Instructor Williams today." As Sarah completed the paperwork, she noticed other students filtering into the range area. Most were men, though she spotted 2 other women in the group of 12. Everyone seemed confident, chatting about previous shooting experiences or discussing different types of firearms. Sarah felt increasingly out of place in her simple jeans and university t-shirt. The range itself was intimidating. Long lanes stretched out before them, each ending at a paper target mounted 25 yards away. The concrete walls were painted institutional yellow, and the smell of gunpowder hung faintly in the air despite the powerful ventilation system. Instructor Williams emerged from a side office carrying a metal case. He was a thin man in his 50s, with graying hair and sharp eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. Former military, Sarah guessed from his posture and the way he carried himself. "Good morning, everyone. I'm Instructor Williams, and I've been teaching firearms safety and marksmanship for 15 years. Before we begin, let's establish the fundamental rules that will keep everyone safe and alive." He spent the first hour covering safety protocols, proper stance, grip, and sight alignment. Sarah took careful notes, trying to absorb every detail. When Williams demonstrated the proper shooting stance, she practiced along with the others, feeling awkward and uncertain. "Remember," Williams said, his voice carrying clearly through the range, "shooting is 90% mental. Your body follows your mind. If you're thinking about missing, you'll miss. If you're thinking about hitting the target, you have a much better chance of success." Finally, it was time for live fire practice. Williams divided the class into groups of 3, assigning each group to different lanes. Sarah found herself paired with Marcus, a college student who claimed he'd been hunting since age 12, and Janet, a middle-aged nurse who mentioned she'd taken several shooting courses before. Williams handed each student a .22 caliber pistol and a box of ammunition. "Start with 5 rounds. Focus on your fundamentals. Don't worry about where the bullets hit initially, just concentrate on your form." Marcus stepped up to the line first. His shots rang out in quick succession, and when they called the target back, 4 of his 5 shots were clustered near the center. "Not bad for warming up," he said with a grin. Janet went next. Her shots were more deliberate, spaced several seconds apart. When her target returned, 3 shots were in the center ring, and 2 were close. "Getting back into it," she said modestly. Then it was Sarah's turn. She stepped up to the firing line, her heart pounding. The pistol felt heavier than she'd expected, and despite Williams's instructions, she struggled to find a comfortable grip. She raised the weapon, tried to align the sights the way she'd been taught, and slowly squeezed the trigger. The bang was louder than she'd anticipated, even through her ear protection. The recoil jerked her hands upward, and she had no idea where the bullet had gone. She fired 4 more shots, each one feeling just as uncontrolled as the first. When they brought her target back, it was clean. Not a single hole. "Completely missed the target," Marcus said, not bothering to hide his amusement. "All 5 shots," Janet tried to be encouraging. "It takes practice. Everyone misses at first." But as the class continued and Sarah's performance didn't improve, the comments became less kind. During the second round, she missed the target again. During the third round, she managed to hit the paper once, but so far off center that it barely counted. "Maybe shooting isn't for everyone," Marcus whispered to another student, loud enough for Sarah to hear. "Some people just don't have the hand-eye coordination for it." By the lunch break, Sarah had fired 30 rounds and had only managed to hit the target paper 3 times, never anywhere near the center. The other students were hitting the bullseye regularly and discussing advanced techniques. She felt humiliated and considered leaving. Williams approached her during the break as she sat alone at one of the plastic tables in the range's small cafeteria. "Having trouble out there?" Sarah looked up at him, feeling defeated. "I don't think I'm cut out for this. Everyone else is doing so well, and I can't even hit the target consistently." Williams pulled up a chair across from her. "Tell me something, Sarah. What do you do for work?" "I'm a librarian. Good with details, patient, methodical?" Sarah nodded. "I have to be." "Then you have exactly the right personality for marksmanship. The problem isn't your capability. Something else is going on." He leaned forward slightly. "When you're aiming, what are you thinking about?" Sarah considered the question. "Honestly, I'm thinking about everyone watching me, about missing again, about how embarrassed I feel. I keep hearing Marcus laugh when I miss." Williams nodded knowingly. "There's your problem. You're shooting defensively, worried about failure instead of focused on success. This afternoon, I want you to try something different." When the class resumed after lunch, Williams moved Sarah to a lane at the far end of the range, away from the others. "I want you to forget about everyone else. Pretend you're alone here. Focus only on the fundamentals we covered this morning." Sarah appreciated the gesture, but she could still hear the other students talking and laughing. Marcus had started making jokes about her accuracy, and a few others had joined in. Every time she stepped up to fire, she felt their eyes on her, waiting for another failure. The afternoon session was just as disastrous as the morning. Sarah's shots continued to miss the target entirely or barely clipped the edges. With each miss, the comments from other students grew louder and more pointed. "Maybe we should check if she's actually aiming at the right target," someone said. "I've seen people have bad days, but this is something else," another added. Marcus was the worst offender. "Hey, Sarah, maybe you should try standing closer, like a lot closer." Even Janet, who had been supportive earlier, seemed to lose patience. "Are you sure you're following the instructor's guidance? It seems like you're doing something fundamentally wrong." Williams tried to help, adjusting Sarah's stance multiple times, correcting her grip and reminding her about sight alignment. But nothing seemed to work. If anything, the more attention he paid to her struggles, the more self-conscious she became. As the day wore on, Sarah's confidence crumbled completely. She began rushing her shots, just wanting to get through each round as quickly as possible to minimize the embarrassment. Her hands shook slightly each time she raised the pistol, and she found it increasingly difficult to concentrate on Williams's instructions. The final hour of the class was supposed to be a friendly competition, with students taking turns shooting at special targets with smaller bullseyes. Sarah dreaded it. She knew she would embarrass herself further, but she had already paid for the course and didn't want to quit. When her turn came, she stepped up to the line with trembling hands. The range fell quiet as everyone watched, probably expecting another spectacular failure. Sarah raised the pistol, tried to find her sight picture, and pulled the trigger 5 times in quick succession. When they brought the target back, it was clean again. 5 shots, 5 complete misses. The silence was broken by Marcus's loud laugh. "This is incredible. How do you miss an entire target from 25 yards? I mean, statistically, you should hit it by accident at least once." Other students began laughing too. Someone suggested that maybe Sarah was actually an amazing shot who was hitting some other target entirely. Another person joked that she must be shooting at invisible targets that only she could see. Sarah felt her face burning with shame. She wanted to run, to leave the range and never come back. She had never felt so humiliated in her life. Even Williams seemed at a loss for how to help her. As the class ended and students began packing up their equipment, Marcus continued his commentary. Seriously, Sarah, have you considered that maybe shooting just isn't your thing? I mean, we all have different talents. Maybe yours is, I don't know, reading? Sarah gathered her things quietly, avoiding eye contact with everyone. She planned to slip out quickly and pretend this day had never happened. The thought of facing these people again next week for the second session of the course seemed unbearable. But as she headed toward the exit, Williams called after her. "Sarah, wait a moment." She stopped reluctantly, expecting another pep talk about how practice makes perfect or how everyone learns at their own pace. Instead, Williams looked puzzled, almost suspicious. "I need to ask you something," he said quietly, glancing around to make sure the other students were out of earshot. "This is going to sound strange, but I've been teaching for 15 years, and I've never seen anything quite like what happened today." Sarah braced herself for more criticism. "I know I'm terrible at this. You don't need to—" Williams held up a hand to stop her. "No, that's not what I mean. I've had students who struggled, students who needed extra help, students who took weeks to hit their first bullseye. But what I saw today doesn't make sense." He paused, studying her face carefully. "Your stance was good by the end of the day. Your grip was solid. Your sight alignment looked correct from what I could see. You were following all the fundamentals properly." Sarah didn't understand where he was going with this. "Then why couldn't I hit anything?" Williams was quiet for a long moment, then his eyes narrowed slightly. "That's exactly what I'm wondering. With your form, even as a complete beginner, you should have been hitting the target. Maybe not the center, but somewhere on the paper. The fact that you missed completely, shot after shot with proper technique." He trailed off, looking troubled. "What are you saying?" Williams glanced around the range once more, then stepped closer to Sarah. "I'm saying something doesn't add up. And 15 years of experience has taught me that when something doesn't add up in shooting, there's usually a reason." His voice dropped to almost a whisper. "I want you to come back tomorrow evening after we close to regular customers. Come alone. I think we need to figure out what's really going on here." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine at his serious tone. "What do you think is happening?" They mocked her for missing every shot, until the instructor hissed, "Check behind." Part 2. Sarah barely slept that night. Williams' words kept echoing in her mind. Check behind your target. What could that possibly mean? She replayed every shot from the day before, trying to understand what he suspected. The humiliation from the other students' laughter still stung, but now curiosity was beginning to override her embarrassment. The next evening, Sarah arrived at the Metro City shooting range 15 minutes before closing time. The parking lot was nearly empty, with only a few cars belonging to staff members. Through the windows, she could see the last customers of the day packing up their equipment. Williams met her at the front door, his expression serious. "Thanks for coming back. I know yesterday was rough." Sarah nodded, still feeling the sting of embarrassment. "I almost didn't come. I've never been so humiliated in my life." "I understand. But I think there's more to your story than a simple case of beginner's nerves." Williams led her through the now quiet range. "I spent some time thinking about what I observed yesterday, and I keep coming back to the same conclusion. What happened doesn't make sense from a ballistics standpoint." They walked to the same lane Sarah had used the day before. Williams had already set up a fresh target at the 25-yard line. The range felt different without the crowd of students, quieter and somehow more focused. "Before we begin," Williams said, "I want you to know that I've been doing some research. I called a colleague who works at the police academy and I described your situation. He agreed that something unusual is happening here." Williams handed Sarah the same type of .22 pistol she had used the day before. "Tonight we're going to approach this differently. I want you to shoot, but I'm going to be watching everything much more carefully. And afterwards we're going to inspect not just your target, but the entire backstop area." Sarah felt nervous but determined. The absence of mocking voices and judging eyes already made her feel more relaxed. She took her stance, checked her grip, and aligned her sights just as Williams had taught her. "Take your time," Williams said softly. "Forget about yesterday. Focus on the fundamentals." Sarah breathed slowly and squeezed the trigger. The shot rang out, and she immediately felt that something was different. The recoil seemed more controlled, her follow-through smoother. She fired 4 more shots, each one feeling better than the last. When they brought the target back, Sarah's heart sank. Once again, it was completely clean. Not a single bullet hole. "I don't understand," she said, her voice breaking slightly. "It felt right this time." "I thought for sure I was hitting it." But Williams didn't look disappointed. Instead, his expression had grown more intense, almost excited. "That's exactly what I expected to see. Sarah, your shooting form tonight was excellent. Those were good shots by any measure. But I missed completely again." "Did you?" Williams asked, cryptically. "Come with me." He led her down the lane toward the target area. Behind each shooting lane was a large backstop made of steel plates designed to catch bullets safely. Williams pulled a flashlight from his pocket and began examining the backstop behind Sarah's target. "Look at this," he said, directing the beam of light to a specific area. Sarah peered closer and gasped. There, embedded in the steel backstop, were 5 fresh bullet impacts clustered tightly together. The grouping was impressive, especially for a beginner. "Those are my shots?" Sarah asked in amazement. "They have to be. You're the only person who's used this lane today." Williams measured the distance between the bullet impacts with his fingers. "This is actually excellent marksmanship, Sarah. These shots are grouped within about 3 inches of each other." Sarah stared at the evidence in confusion. "But if I'm hitting behind the target, that means you're shooting high. Consistently high." Williams moved his flashlight beam upward, illuminating the area above where Sarah's target had been mounted. "And I think I know why." Williams walked back to the target mounting system and began examining it closely. After a few minutes, he called Sarah over. "Look at this," he said, pointing to the target clip mechanism. "Do you see anything unusual?" Sarah studied the metal clips that held the target paper in place. At first, everything looked normal. Then she noticed something odd. "Is that clip bent?" Williams nodded grimly. "Not just bent. It's been deliberately altered. Someone has modified this clip so that when a target is mounted, it hangs about 4 inches lower than it should." The implications hit Sarah like a wave. "So when I was aiming at the center of the target, you were actually aiming at a point 4 inches above where the target really was," Williams finished, "which explains why all your shots were hitting the backstop above the target area." Sarah felt anger beginning to build. "Someone sabotaged my target? But who would do that?" Williams's expression was dark. "I have a pretty good idea. Tell me, did anyone have access to your lane before class started yesterday?" Sarah thought back to the previous day. "Well, I was one of the first to arrive. I remember Marcus was already there talking to a couple of other students. He seemed to know his way around the place pretty well." "Marcus Chen," Williams said with obvious distaste. "I should have suspected. He's taken courses here before, and he's always had an attitude problem, too cocky for his own good." Williams pulled out his cell phone and began scrolling through contacts. "Sarah, I need to make a call. This is serious business. Sabotaging safety equipment at a gun range isn't just a prank, it's dangerous and potentially criminal." While Williams made his phone call, Sarah examined the modified target clip more closely. The alteration was subtle but deliberate. Someone with knowledge of how the targeting system worked had carefully bent the clip in a way that would consistently cause targets to hang lower than their apparent position. Williams finished his call and returned to Sarah's side. "I just spoke with Rick, our range safety officer. He's coming in to document this. We're also going to review the security camera footage from yesterday." "There are cameras." "Absolutely. We record everything for safety and liability purposes." Williams's expression was grim. "If someone tampered with your equipment, we'll have it on video." They spent the next 20 minutes waiting for Rick to arrive. During that time, Williams had Sarah shoot another series of rounds, this time with a properly mounted target. The difference was remarkable. Her shots clustered nicely in the center ring of the target. "This is what I expected to see yesterday," Williams said, examining Sarah's target. "You're actually a natural at this. Your hand-eye coordination is excellent and you have a steady trigger pull." When Rick arrived, he was furious about the sabotage. "In 20 years of running ranges, I've never seen anything like this. This isn't just unsportsmanlike conduct, it's tampering with safety equipment." They spent an hour documenting the modified clip and reviewing security footage. The cameras clearly showed Marcus arriving early and spending several minutes alone at Sarah's lane before other students arrived. "Look at this," Rick said, pointing to the monitor. "He's definitely doing something to the target mounting system. And here you can see him checking to make sure no one is watching." Williams shook his head in disgust. "The kid's been trouble before. Last year he got into an argument with another student and accused them of using illegal ammunition when they outshot him." "What happens now?" Sarah asked. Rick was already pulling up Marcus's registration information on his computer. "Now he gets banned from this facility permanently. I'm also filing a report with local law enforcement. What he did was criminal mischief at minimum, possibly reckless endangerment." Sarah felt a complex mix of emotions: relief that she wasn't actually a terrible shot, anger at Marcus for humiliating her, and satisfaction that the truth had been discovered. But mostly she felt grateful to Williams for believing that something was wrong and investigating further. "I have to ask," Sarah said to Williams, "what made you suspicious in the first place?" Williams considered the question carefully. "Honestly, it was your attitude that convinced me something was off. You were clearly trying hard, following instructions, and your technique was improving throughout the day. But your results weren't matching your effort. In my experience, when someone's form is good but their results are terrible, there's usually an external factor involved." Rick printed out several photos from the security footage, showing Marcus tampering with the target clip. "These will go to the police along with my report. Sarah, I want to personally apologize for what happened. This kind of behavior is completely unacceptable." Williams set up a fresh target for Sarah. "Before you leave tonight, I want you to shoot one more group, but this time, I want you to shoot knowing that your equipment hasn't been sabotaged, knowing that your technique is actually quite good, and knowing that you belong on this range as much as anyone else." Sarah stepped up to the firing line with a completely different mindset than she'd had 24 hours earlier. The humiliation and self-doubt were gone, replaced by confidence and righteous anger. She took her stance, aligned her sights, and fired 5 deliberate shots. When they brought the target back, all 5 shots were clustered in the center ring, with 3 of them in the bullseye itself. "Outstanding," Williams said with genuine admiration. "That's shooting that would make most intermediate students jealous." Rick whistled appreciatively. "Sarah, you've got real talent for this." "I hope what happened yesterday doesn't sour you on the sport." Sarah studied her target, still amazed at the difference proper equipment made. "Actually, I think I want to continue with the course, but I'm not sure I can face those other students after what happened." Williams and Rick exchanged glances. "About that," Rick said carefully, I think the dynamic in your class is about to change significantly. When word gets out about what Marcus did, and about how well you can actually shoot, I suspect you'll find a very different reception. Plus, Williams added, Marcus won't be there. He's banned as of tonight. As Sarah prepared to leave, Williams handed her a business card. I want you to consider something. You've got natural talent, and after what you've been through, you've proven you have the mental toughness for competitive shooting. I coach a women's marksmanship team that competes regionally. If you're interested, I think you'd do very well. Sarah looked at the card in surprise. 24 hours ago, she had been the worst shooter in the class, a laughingstock among the other students. Now she was being invited to join a competitive team. Think about it, Williams said, but don't think too long. Our next competition is in 6 weeks, and I'd love to have you on the team. As Sarah drove home that night, she reflected on how completely her perspective had changed. The humiliation of the previous day had been replaced by pride in her newly discovered ability, but more than that, she had learned something important about perseverance and about trusting her instincts when something didn't seem right. She thought about Marcus and felt more pity than anger. His insecurity had led him to sabotage a complete stranger rather than focus on improving his own skills. His need to feel superior had ultimately led to his ban from the range and potential criminal charges. But mostly, Sarah thought about Williams and his willingness to investigate when things didn't add up. His experience and intuition had saved her from believing she was hopeless at something she was actually quite good at. Sarah made a decision as she pulled into her driveway. Tomorrow, she would call Williams and accept his invitation to try out for the competitive team. It was time to see just how good she could become when no one was sabotaging her efforts. Williams looked directly into her eyes, his expression grim. I don't know yet, but I have a feeling we need to check behind your target. They mocked her for missing every shot, until the instructor hissed, "Check behind." Part 3, 6 weeks later, Sarah stood at the firing line of the Regional Women's Marksmanship Championship, her heart pounding with nervous excitement rather than the humiliation she had felt during her first shooting experience. The indoor range was larger than Metro City's facility, with 30 lanes and state-of-the-art equipment. Competitors from 12 states had gathered for the weekend tournament. Williams stood beside her, clipboard in hand, wearing the team coach jacket that Sarah had helped him earn. Remember what we've practiced, he said quietly. Trust your fundamentals, control your breathing, and don't overthink it. Sarah nodded, adjusting her shooting glasses. The past 6 weeks had been a whirlwind of intensive training. After accepting Williams's invitation to try out for the competitive team, she had discovered not only that she had natural talent, but that she had an almost obsessive drive to improve. She practiced 4 evenings a week and spent weekends at longer-range outdoor facilities. The story of Marcus's sabotage had spread through the local shooting community quickly. Rick had made sure of it, using Sarah's case as an example of why range safety protocols were so important. Marcus had indeed faced criminal charges for tampering with safety equipment, receiving a substantial fine and community service. More importantly to Sarah, the other students from her original class had sought her out to apologize for their behavior and to congratulate her on making the competitive team. Janet, the nurse who had initially tried to be supportive, had been particularly apologetic. I should have known something was wrong, she had said. Your dedication and effort were obvious. I'm ashamed that I doubted you instead of questioning why the results didn't match your work ethic. But Sarah had moved past the hurt from those early days. The experience had taught her valuable lessons about resilience and the importance of trusting her instincts when something didn't feel right. First relay, take your positions, announced the range officer. Sarah was shooting in the expert division, having qualified through a series of regional trials. Her scores over the past month had been consistently impressive, and Williams believed she had a real chance of placing in the top 10. As Sarah settled into her shooting stance, she reflected on how much her life had changed since that humiliating first day at the range. She had not only discovered a talent she never knew she had, but she had found a community of supportive women who shared her passion for precision and competition. The team had welcomed her enthusiastically once they learned her story. Maria Santos, a veteran competitor in her 40s, had become something of a mentor. "What happened to you is every shooter's nightmare," Maria had told her. "But the way you fought through it and didn't give up shows the kind of mental strength that separates good shooters from great ones." "Load and make ready," came the range officer's command. Sarah inserted her magazine smoothly, chambered a round, and brought her pistol to the ready position. The familiar weight felt natural in her hands now, like an extension of her body rather than an awkward foreign object. Williams had pushed her hard during training, not just on technical skills, but on mental preparation. "Competitive shooting is 90% psychological," he had repeated countless times. "Your body already knows what to do. Your job is to keep your mind calm and focused." They had worked extensively on visualization techniques, breathing exercises, and dealing with pressure. Sarah had learned to channel her natural tendency toward perfectionism, which served her well as a librarian, into the precise discipline required for marksmanship. "Shooters ready?" called the range officer. Sarah raised her pistol and found her sight picture. The target, 50 feet away, looked smaller than what she had trained on, but Williams had prepared her for that. "Competition targets always look smaller," he had warned. "Trust your training and your sight alignment." "Fire!" Sarah's first shot broke cleanly, surprising her with its smoothness. She had learned to analyze each shot immediately after firing, noting what felt right or wrong without losing focus on the next shot. This one had felt perfect. She settled back into her stance and fired the remaining 9 shots of the first string methodically. Each shot was deliberate and controlled. She had learned to ignore the sounds of other shooters around her, focusing entirely on her own performance. When the first relay ended and they retrieved their targets, Sarah was amazed by what she saw. 9 of her 10 shots were in the 9 and 10 rings, with 6 shots in the bullseye itself. It was by far the best string she had ever shot in competition. Williams examined her target with barely contained excitement. "This is exceptional shooting, Sarah. If you can maintain this level for the remaining 2 strings, you're going to surprise a lot of people here today." During the break between relays, Sarah noticed several competitors and coaches looking in her direction and whispering. As the new shooter on the scene, she was attracting attention, especially given her remarkable scores for someone so new to the sport. "Don't let it get to you," Maria advised, appearing at Sarah's side. "Newcomers always get scrutinized. Some people are hoping you'll crack under pressure. Others are genuinely curious about where you came from so suddenly." Sarah sipped water and tried to stay relaxed. She thought back to those first terrible days at the range when everyone had watched her miss shot after shot. The situation was completely different now, but the feeling of being observed was familiar. "I'm nervous," she admitted to Maria. "Good," Maria replied. "Nerves mean you care. The trick is using that energy to sharpen your focus instead of letting it make you tense." Williams returned from talking with other coaches. "Sarah, I want you to know that several coaches have already asked me about your background. Word is getting around that you're shooting unusually well for someone who's only been competing for 6 weeks. Is that a problem?" "Not at all. It's a compliment. But I want you to be prepared for more attention as the day goes on." The second relay began with Sarah feeling more confident, but also more pressure. She knew that maintaining her performance would be challenging, especially as fatigue began to set in. Competitive shooting demanded not just skill, but physical and mental endurance. This time, her start was slightly shakier. The first shot was a bit wide, scoring an 8 instead of the 9 or 10 she had been hitting consistently. For a moment, doubt crept in. Was she about to fall apart under pressure like she had feared? But Sarah remembered Williams's coaching about dealing with bad shots. Don't let one poor shot ruin the entire string, he had taught her. Acknowledge it, learn from it, and move on. The next shot is the only one that matters. She took a deep breath, reset her stance, and focused on her sight alignment. The remaining 9 shots felt solid, and when they scored her target, she had recovered well. 8 shots in the 9 and 10 rings, with only the first shot letting her down. Williams was pleased. That's exactly how you handle pressure. You didn't let that first shot snowball into a disaster. That kind of mental resilience is what separates recreational shooters from competitors. As they prepared for the final relay, Sarah noticed that a small crowd of spectators had gathered behind the firing line. It was unusual for so many people to watch the women's pistol competition, and she realized they were there specifically to see how she would finish. The pressure was now intense. Sarah's combined score from the first 2 relays had her in 3rd place overall, an incredible position for a novice competitor. A strong final string could potentially put her on the podium at her first major competition. Forget about placement, Williams advised. Just shoot your own match. Focus on executing each shot properly and let the scores take care of themselves. But Sarah found it impossible to ignore the implications. A podium finish would validate everything she had worked for over the past 6 weeks. More than that, it would be the ultimate response to everyone who had laughed at her during those first terrible days at the range. As the final relay began, Sarah struggled with her mental game. She was thinking too much about results instead of process, exactly what Williams had warned her against. Her first 3 shots felt rushed and anxious. When she looked at her target through the spotting scope, her fears were confirmed. 2 8s and a 7. She was falling apart under pressure, just like Marcus had probably hoped she would all those weeks ago. Sarah felt panic beginning to creep in. She had 7 shots remaining, and she needed them all to be excellent to maintain her position. The crowd behind the line seemed larger now, and she could hear whispered conversations about whether the newcomer was about to choke. Then something clicked in Sarah's mind. She remembered why she had started this journey in the first place, not for trophies or recognition, but because someone had tried to make her believe she was incapable of something she was actually good at. She had proven that person wrong, and she had already exceeded every expectation she had set for herself. The pressure suddenly felt different. Instead of anxiety about winning, Sarah felt gratitude for the opportunity to compete at this level. Instead of fear of failure, she felt proud of how far she had come. She settled into her stance for the 4th shot with renewed calm. This time, she ignored the crowd, the competition standings, and even William's presence beside her. She focused only on the fundamentals: stance, grip, sight alignment, trigger control, follow-through. The 4th shot felt perfect, so did the 5th and the 6th. Sarah found herself in what athletes call the zone, where conscious thought disappears and muscle memory takes over. Each shot felt inevitable, like the natural conclusion of a process she had mastered through weeks of dedicated practice. When the final relay ended and they retrieved targets for scoring, Sarah was almost afraid to look. She had felt good about those last 7 shots, but she had learned not to trust feelings over objective results. Williams examined her target with a magnifying glass, counting carefully. Then he looked up at Sarah with a huge grin. 7 10s and 2 9s in your last 9 shots. That's some of the best shooting I've seen at any level. The final scores were posted an hour later, after all divisions had completed their competition. Sarah stared at the results board in disbelief. Her name appeared in 2nd place overall, just 3 points behind the defending champion who had been competing for over 15 years. The award ceremony was a blur. As Sarah stood on the podium accepting her silver medal, she thought about Marcus and wondered if he had learned anything from the consequences of his actions. She thought about the other students from her first class and hoped they understood the importance of supporting newcomers rather than mocking them. Mostly, she thought about Williams and his decision to investigate when something didn't make sense. His experience and integrity had given her the chance to discover abilities she never knew she had. After the ceremony, Sarah was approached by several coaches from major universities. They had heard about her rapid rise in the sport and were interested in discussing scholarship opportunities for competitive shooting programs. 6 weeks ago, I couldn't hit a target from 25 yards, Sarah told one recruiter with a laugh. Now you're talking about college scholarships. It doesn't seem real. But it was real, and Sarah had earned every bit of it through dedication, perseverance, and the willingness to trust herself when others doubted her abilities. Williams joined them as the recruiting conversations wound down. So what's next for you, Sarah? College competition? Regional championships? Maybe even national-level competitions? Sarah considered the question. The opportunities were exciting, but she had learned something important about herself over the past few weeks. Success wasn't just about personal achievement, it was about using your abilities to make a positive difference. I want to keep competing, she said finally, but I also want to start teaching. I want to help other people discover talents they might not know they have. And I especially want to work with people who are struggling, who might be dealing with self-doubt or discouragement. Williams smiled proudly. I think that's a perfect plan. The sport needs more instructors who understand that success isn't just about scores and trophies. It's about helping people believe in themselves. As Sarah drove home that evening, her silver medal on the passenger seat beside her, she reflected on the remarkable journey that had begun with humiliation and ended with triumph. She had learned that talent without support and proper equipment is worthless, but that with the right guidance and determination, people are capable of achieving things they never thought possible. More importantly, she had learned that sometimes the greatest victories come not from beating others, but from proving to yourself that you're stronger and more capable than anyone ever imagined, especially yourself. The next week, Sarah returned to Metro City Shooting Range, not as a struggling student, but as an assistant instructor. Williams had offered her the position, and she had accepted immediately. Her first class included several nervous beginners who reminded her of herself just weeks earlier. The most important thing to remember, she told them as they gathered for their first lesson, is that shooting is a skill that can be learned by anyone willing to practice and stay dedicated. Don't let anyone tell you that you don't have what it takes. And if something doesn't feel right, trust your instincts and speak up. As she watched her students take their first shots, Sarah made a promise to herself. She would never let anyone experience the humiliation and self-doubt that Marcus had tried to inflict on her. Every student would be treated with respect and given every opportunity to succeed. The young woman at Lane 3 missed her first 5 shots completely, just as Sarah had done weeks earlier. But this time, instead of mockery and laughter, the response from other students was encouragement and support. It takes practice, called out an older gentleman from Lane 1. I missed my first 20 shots when I started. Sarah smiled, knowing that this was how it should be. This was how people helped each other discover their potential instead of tearing each other down. This was how real strength was built, not through putting others down, but through lifting them up.